Well, welcome, ladies. Are you ready to get started tonight? I have a feeling some people may be watching the Astros. So I thought I'd give you a report. I just looked at the score. It's the top of the sixth, and they're winning 4-0. Go figure. I gave up on them last night. I went to bed. Anybody stay up for the ninth inning? No? Anyway, there's still hope. There's still hope. Anyway, thanks for coming back. I'm so glad to see all of you. I'm really going to try hard to learn names. Hi, welcome. Did you guys carpool? Yeah, you did. Name tags, and make sure you get a handout. And if you need a Bible, I have Kristen brought some for us. They're up front. Anyway, no worries, no worries. I'm just glad you all are here. So tonight we are going to be in Rahab. There might have been a little confusion. It was on my part. Initially, when I sent the list of the studies in to Kristen, I called tonight Hagar. Hagar plays a very important role in the Old Testament. She was bore the firstborn son of Abraham, who was Ishmael, who then became the father of the Arab nations. But we're not going to go there. We're going with Rahab tonight. So if you came to hear Hagar, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're going to be disappointed. Anyway, we will be in the Old Testament again. We're going to be in the book of Joshua. I put the verses up here that we'll be studying. I'll go through them for those of you on Zoom so you know what we're actually studying. Time-wise, it's a couple generations after the period of time we were in last week with Lot and Lot's wife, Abraham. Hi. Only Jesus can do that, right? Welcome. Grab a name tag and a handout, if you would. It was written in the year 1400 BC by Joshua. You think about the Old Testament, the first 5 books are called the Pentateuch, the Torah, the Jewish people call it the Torah. Joshua is the 6th book of the Bible. So Moses has just died, and now Joshua is the man who's God has put in charge to really lead them into the promised land. God's already given it with the covenant with Abraham. That's a given. But now Joshua is actually going to be the military leader, and the very first battles against the inhabitants of Canaan are going to be the ones that Joshua goes over. So that's what we're going to talk about. But recording's in progress. That's good. So look at your maps. We're going to use a map again. Different map. It's very similar to last week's, but it's a little bit of a blow up because we don't need to worry about Sodom and Gomorrah because they don't exist anymore. So they're not on this map. And I'm just going to circle a few places because we're gonna go there, and rather than have to fumble for it later. Jericho is going to be the main place that we will spend our time in this evening. To the right of Jericho is Gilgal, and that is actually going to be an encampment, the place that Joshua takes his army just before they go to Jericho. So you can circle that. Shittah, right below that, that is the main camp. So when there's several verses, we're not going to cover them, but there's several verses where Joshua is building his army, he's training them, he's skilling them up to go to war. That's their main camp, so that's going to be referenced in here. And then Jericho was a major city of life at the time, a major hub. And so I just drew a purple, color does not matter, like the Houston Beltway. So go out maybe an inch and just draw a big circle around Jericho. That was, just like Houston, downtown Houston is downtown Houston with a lot of businesses, but then the outreach of Houston is massive. And Jericho's wasn't massive. It only went out about 15 miles in each direction, but still anything that happened in Jericho would have affected the people around. That will become important when we get there, okay? So that's just your grounding on the places we're going to visit tonight, all right? So it's the 6th book of the Bible. The Pentateuch discusses creation and the Exodus, the laws, the Jewish laws that people are expected to follow, the sacrificial offerings that they would have to make to atone for sin. and more laws for the Levites, for the priests. So that's the beginning, but now we're kind of getting where the action is. It was a horrible, horrible time in the life of Israel. It was a time of judges. There were warring factions. The Moabites, the Ammonites were all there and competing with each other. Prostitution ran rampant. Infant sacrifice was not uncommon. It was horrible. It was brutal. It was total depravity. So you can say, well, it sounds like Sodom. And to be honest, my guess is a lot of what was going on in Sodom just moved a little further north. So it was not a godly place by any means. And so you could imagine that God would say, I've got to deal with this place called Jericho. It's a big hub. It was also, if you see where it is, it's right above the Dead Sea. It's right adjacent to the River Jordan. It was a major thoroughfare. People would travel with their caravans, maybe procuring supplies, driving their cattle. So it was a big spot. And if it's full of people that are ungodly and living these depraved lives, the Lord says, I need to deal with that. We're not going to let that go on. But now the time has come for the conquest, and the Lord has just the man to lead it, and that's Joshua. So I'm going to start reading in Joshua chapter 1, verse 1. I'm going to read through verses 9. And this is just to give you context. It's not the meat of our story, but there's some points here I want to make. So Joshua chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came about after the death of Moses. Moses has just died. He died on your map. If you look at Gilgal, he died right near there on Mount Horeb. So he's in the same vicinity. That's where Moses died. The Lord took him up to the mountaintop, and he got to look at all of the land, 360-degree panorama. And the Lord could say, this is the land I have given you. This is the land that came from your relationship with Sarah and the birth of Isaac. So, and then Moses died. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my dear servant is dead. Now, therefore, arise. Cross this Jordan. You've got that on your map. Cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. Much of the same language he had used with Abraham. This land I am giving you, you and your descendants. Verse 3, every place on which the sole of your feet treads, I have given to you, just as I spoke to Moses. Verse 4, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even as far as the great river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, as far as the great sea, which is the Mediterranean Sea, towards the setting of the sun of your territory. This map was the territory that was theirs, that God had proclaimed for them. You could see Canaan, Moab, Ammon. Some of these places were certainly ungodly, but it was in God's purview that they would all come to him, that he would eventually be their God and they would be his people. But verse 5, no man will be able to stand before you in all the days of your life. I've got your back, Joshua. I know I'm sending you into a difficult land. I'm giving you a big job to defeat these people, but I am with you. Just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. Remember those words. When you are up against an enemy, the enemy, a difficult situation, the Lord will be with you. He will not fail you. He will not forsake you. Verse 6, be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of their land, which I swore to their fathers to give to them. Verse 7, second mention, only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left. This way you will have success wherever you go. So in other words, you look to me, you follow my laws and my statutes and everything I tell you, and you will have victory. Verse 8, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it every day and night, so that you may be careful to do this according to all that is written. For then you will make your way prosperous and you will have success. If you are wholly devoted to me, you will have success. One more time, have I not commanded you, says the Lord, be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Do you feel strong and courageous? You know, we've titled this series, Be Brave. And in life today, we have to be brave. We come up against a lot of difficult circumstances and situations and people, and we need to be brave. It doesn't mean we need to beat our chests and rant and rave. Sometimes being brave means being quiet and being subtle. But we need to be brave if we're going to live the Christian life. It is not a passive life. It is a get in there and do it life. Be courageous. Because the Lord, your God, is with you wherever you go. Okay, verses 10 through 16. I'm not going to read through, but this is now Joshua. There's a pattern here. God will speak just to Joshua, and then Joshua goes to the people. So this time he is going to the people and he's saying, we are getting ready to move. We're going to move from this area and we're going to start moving. He doesn't tell them we're going to move towards Jericho, but he starts to move them. Bring your herds, bring your families. We're getting ready to move together. He reminds them, verse 13, the Lord your God gives you rest and will give you this land. So that's the rallying cry. You know, I got a degree years ago in leadership when I was a leadership development person at one of the oil companies. And one of the things I'd have to talk to leaders about is you've got to have a vision for people. You've got to have something more than just crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Why do I want to show up for work every morning? If you're in the healthcare profession, it's easy to see what that vision is. It's helping people. It's making a difference in the world. But for some other businesses and careers, it's not so easy. But here is Joshua saying, this is why we're moving, because God has given us this land and we are going there. We will possess it. And they answered him obediently in verse 16, Joshua, all that you have commanded in us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. So he has the unity of all these families and all these men who are ultimately going to become warriors, and they head with him towards Jericho, but not there yet. Now, this is our chapter coming up, chapter 2. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men as spies secretly from Shittah, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. Notice that now Joshua so God has spoken to Joshua. Joshua has spoken to 2 men about the plan. Everybody has moved. He only told them they were moving because they were on their way to possess the land. But here he's bringing these 2 guys together, 2 spies together. And he says, go view the land, especially Jericho. Well, we talked a little bit about Jericho and how important it was. I looked up in the internet, the source of all good. And people from miles around thought of Jericho as their city. So if there was any news came from Jericho, anything good was known, anything bad, they might go to Jericho. Jericho was a walled city. In those days, cities were walled in order to protect them. And the walls were substantial. The walls of Jericho were 30 to 40 feet high, 4-story building. How tall is this building? 3 stories? 3 stories. 1 more story high. And the walls were as wide or as thick as 2 carriages. So I imagine 2 carriages might be the distance from that wall to maybe here. That was the thickness and the height of the wall. It was substantial. So if you were living outside of that area and you were afraid, the place to go would be inside the walls of Jericho. But we talked about how evil it was. It was Sin City in every way. So we've talked a little bit about that. So now he's told the 2 spies, he's enlisted them. I want you to go view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and came into the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and they lodged there. Now, you could say, isn't that a strange place to go? And the answer is not really. First of all, prostitution was common. This was a city that was basking in its sin and its depravity. But it was also a place of lodging. They needed a place to stay, and they needed a place within the walls of Jericho. Rahab happened to be she was a very successful prostitute and innkeeper. And her house, her part of the wall, she lived in the wall, was at the very top. I call it the penthouse. She was at the very top, and she had a wonderful view outside the wall, and apparently she could also see inside the wall. She could pay attention to everything going on. Prostitutes would entertain locals and guests who traveled in the caravans. We talked about that. But it was also a place of discretion. She was very discreet with her clients, people that might not want others to know that they were frequenting there. So if you're a spy, it could be a good place to go because she's not going to talk. She's going to preserve your anonymity or the confidentiality. And it also gave them a perfect vantage point to see the surrounding area because they were going, remember, they were sent by Joshua to check out Jericho, to check out the wall, the fortifications, the people, any preparations that might be made, etc. And so the spies needed a good viewpoint. But the most important fact here is that no matter what we think of harlots and prostitutes, no matter what maybe we even think of Rahab, she was part of God's plan. Because the message Joshua gave them was go to Jericho. And they went to the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab. How did they end up there? There were lots of places of prostitution they could have gone to. But somehow, either through Joshua or through the Lord speaking to them, they ended up where Rahab was. They weren't there for any sexual pleasure. They were simply there to use her home in order to spy the land and see where things were. And she was a Gentile. She was actually an Amorite. She grew up there. She had spent her whole life living in this place of depravity. She may not have thought prostitution was anything bad or unusual because that's the environment she grew up in. So she belonged to this idolatrous people, but we will find out in a minute. She's a very wise woman, and she is a worldly woman. She sees the world outside of Jericho. Why? Because the men that would come and stay with her, many of them were local, but many of them were people traveling on this thoroughfare as they would come through Jericho, come across the Jordan River, heading to the east or heading to the west. And so she would entertain them and she would have conversations with them. And in that, she would hear things about the surrounding area. So she was clever and she was wise. She learned about the exploits of God with the Israelites, how he dried up the Red Sea, how he had led Israelites to battle over their enemies, how he had continued to strengthen his people. She knew all of this, and she also knew that her people were afraid. She had a lot of information. She also heard news of this encampment of soldiers right on the other side of the Jordan River. She saw judgment coming. She knew that this was a mighty army of God, this God that was able to stop a sea or kill bad people all over the Holy Land. So she was thinking also in terms of her own future and her own destiny. So let's continue reading. Verse 2. So the two spies had just spent the night there. It says they lodged there. They stayed there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. Now, he does not know that for certain. It's highly unlikely that these two spies that had made their way to Rahab's house would have been spotted. They would have dressed like everybody else in Jericho, but somehow they made their way up to this top home on the wall. And the king knew it. So he sent word to Rahab. He didn't go himself, but he sent word, verse 3, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out the land. But the woman, this is her wisdom and her shrewdness, but the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. Jump ahead to verse 6. But she had brought them, the two men, up to the roof and hidden them in stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. She had anticipated that maybe someone would come to find these two men that were presumed to be there. Nobody knew for certain. So she said, yes, the men came to me, but I do not know where they were from. Did they ask her where they were from? Did the two men, did the messenger from the king ask her where the men were from? No. Why might she have said that? Why might she have said, I don't know where they are from?
Because she knew where they were from.
She knew where they were from.
She knew there was fear within Jericho.
You bet. You bet there was fear in Jericho. Why else might she have said, I don't know where they are from?
She wanted to distance herself from them, like she went in cahoots with
That's
them.
right. It's like, don't ask me. I don't even know what you're talking about. What else? It's more subtle. I think she was just creating a distraction. You know, it's a little more time for the spies maybe to realize, uh-oh, there's somebody downstairs. We're on the roof. There's somebody downstairs that's come to find us, making sure they're covered with this flax up there on the roof. So if the guys decide to search the house and search the roof, they won't be found. I do not know where they were from. Verse 5, and it came about when it was time to shut the gate at night that the men went out. So this is the story she's making up. She's protecting them. So now she's moved from being a resident of Jericho, an Ammonite woman, a Gentile, a prostitute, and now she's protecting these men who were godly men that God had sent on this mission. The men went out. I do not know where they went. Pursue them quickly and you will overtake them. So yeah, they were here. I don't know who they are, but they are gone. Go get them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them. We talked about that. Verse 7. So the men, these are the king's messengers, the men pursued them, the two spies, the spies that really didn't go anywhere, but they think they've gone somewhere on the road to the Jordan, to the fords. The fords, they're not on here, but it's to the east. So she sent the king's messengers to the right, to the east. Now, ironically, that's also in the vicinity of Shittah, where Joshua's army was camped, which I find really interesting. But she sent them and said, go, go. That's the way they went. As soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate. The people of Jericho at this point were already terrified. They had heard, like I said, Rahab had heard these stories from the people coming to visit her, to stay with her. And the word had gotten out within the community of Jericho. And so they were frightened. They were fearing for their lives. And yes, they had this walled city. And so why not take advantage of it? And what they did, the logical thing, as soon as these two men left, they shut the gate, thinking that they were protected. Now, verse 8, before they lay down, these are the two spies now, they're still there. The messengers are on a wild goose chase, but the two spies are still there on the roof. Before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. Why do you think she said that with so much certainty? I know the Lord has given you the land.
Maybe she's spiritually sensitive from those men.
Yeah, maybe she's savvy, right? And she's paying attention to life. And she was a woman who had to be smart about the people she dealt with, how she managed them politically. Welcome. What else? What else might have led her to have such confidence?
You see it in the following verses. That's her certainty about hearing what the Lord has done for the Israelites.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah. So she had a clear picture of the power of the Lord and what he was capable of doing. So she says, I know that the Lord has given you the land and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. People are trembling in fear. People don't know what to do with themselves. People from outside, remember I talked about, I'm gonna call it the beltway of Jericho. People from outside Jericho also would have been fearful and probably would have come inside the city gates for their own protection. So the word had gotten out. Verse 10, for we have heard, hear how specific what she knows. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. And what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. Throughout the first part of the Old Testament, those two words, utterly destroyed, are used over and over again. It was used with Sodom. We need to utterly destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Why? Because they are just sin-sick cities. So she has heard this from the people that have been around, and it has given her a fear of the Lord, that this is a powerful God, this is a mighty God, and this is a God that can do anything. Verse 11, and when we heard it, we, the citizens of Jericho, when we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven and on earth beneath it. This was her moment when it seems like she articulated out loud that maybe he was her God too, that she had come to believe. You know, we all come to believe in different ways. Sometimes it's as a child, and we're given, we're raised in a Christian home, and we believe at an early age. But later in life, when we're an adult, we have to make that decision to believe. And it comes in all sorts of ways. Different things drive us to that decision. Maybe it's a sermon, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's something you watch online. Maybe you're invited to a luncheon, like the dinner you're having on the 8th, and you hear a witness or you hear a word, and it resonates in your heart. I think this was the moment when she accepted God and was willing to consider God as her Father. Verse 12, now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord. She knows the Lord makes covenants with his people. He made a covenant with Abraham. He's made covenants with other people. Swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, which she had, that you will also deal kindly with my father's household and give me a pledge of truth, and spare my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters with all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. So I have protected you. I've let you in. I've protected you. I've hidden you. I've sent the king's men off in the opposite direction. I'm going to send you. I'm asking this one. I accept your Lord, your God. I think I understand who he is, but I need this one thing from you. I need protection from me, and I need protection from my family. Because it was pretty clear that Joshua and his men were coming to utterly destroy Jericho. And when they utterly destroy, that means everything, everyone, every animal, the physical structure, destroyed. Verse 14, the spies said to her, our life for yours, if you do not tell this business of ours, and it shall come about when the Lord gives us the land, that we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. In other words, we will do that, but you have to keep this a secret. No one can know. So when you tell your family to come move in with you, it better be gradual, not all of them at once coming in the front door, because that's going to cause concern and alarm. And when they get there, you're going to have to give them some reason for coming there that would not betray this arrangement, this covenant we're making between the two of us. We can't risk the word getting out. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall, so that she was living on the wall. Repetition again, crystal clear. She lives on the wall, the top of the wall. So she lets them down by a rope through the window. Verse 16, and she said to them, go to the hill country. Get your map out again. Where did she send the king's men? East, towards Shittah. And where did she send the two spies? To the hill country, west, to the mountains in Canaan. You can see, it's a bit of a relief map. You can see there's indications of mountains in those regions. So go to the hill country, lest the pursuers happen upon you, and hide yourself there for 3 days until the pursuers return. Then afterward, you may go on your way. She knew enough about how these men operated that 3 days was about all they were going to invest in searching for the men. After 3 days, they probably would have run out of water, would have run out of food, would have wanted to get back to their family. So in 3 days' time, it was pretty safe to say they'd be heading back to Jericho. Verse 17, and the men said to her, we shall be free from this oath to which you made us swear, unless when we come into the land, you tie this cord of scarlet thread in the window through which you let us down, and gather to yourself into the house your family. In other words, we will do this as long as you hang a red cord outside of your window. That red cord was a symbol. That was a symbol so that when Joshua's men came to Jericho into this wall, this red cord hanging out the window would tell them where Rahab and her family were, and to not destroy that part of the wall, to destroy those people. But if she didn't hang that red cord, they would be free from that oath. They couldn't promise to save her. Now, what's interesting here, in the Hebrew, you look in verse 15, you see the word rope, and you look in verse 18 and you see the word cord. Now, do those words feel pretty much the same to you, rope and cord? Is there a big distinction in your mind? Not really. I mean, because we can buy little cords and big cords and little ropes and big ropes. So there's no real distinction. So I became really curious. Why was it a rope letting him down, but a cord that was an indicator? Notice the cord is of scarlet thread. It's a scarlet color. Probably something she made with all the flax on her roof. They say she probably was weaver and made linen and things like that. So she had that. In the Hebrew, the word rope that's used here also has the connotation of sorrow. Sorrow, sadness, grief. Why do you think that word rope, meaning sorrow, was used in that verse? Why do you think? Could she have had sorrow over this whole situation? She's accepted the Lord.
Whoever except her family was going to die.
Everyone she'd known from birth was going to die. Her friends, her family was saved, but her friends of friends, the people in the marketplace, her customers, all of that would be gone. And so letting down that rope and that word sorrow, you know, when we turn to the Lord and we talked about this last week, we move away from sin and we move away from evil. It's not easy. We know it's the right thing to do, but there's still sorrow walking away from some things that maybe were familiar to us or that were important to us. And so I think it's really amazing. Joshua, the writer here, used that word rope. But the word cord, in verse 18, what's different about this cord than the plain old ordinary rope? It's scarlet. The symbolism of that. Scarlet is used throughout the Bible. Certainly Jesus' death on the cross and his blood shed for the sins of the whole world. A scarlet thread. But also that scarlet thread was her redemption because it allowed her to get out safely. She would be protected. She would be redeemed from that sinful city. She would be redeemed from a life of prostitution. Her whole life would change with that red cord. Just as your life was changed, just as my life was changed. Verse 19, and it shall come about that anyone who goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be free. But anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on him, on our head, and his hand on him. In other words, make especially sure when we start approaching Jericho, you stay in the house, because nothing else will remain. But if you tell this business of ours, verse 20, then we shall be free from the oath which you have made us swear. So some of the things they asked from her were for her own protection. Other things were for their own protection. Verse 21, and she said, according to your words, so be it. So she sent them away to the hill country, the opposite direction of the king's men. And they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. Now, she had no idea when they'd be back. This was all, I have to believe, I have to have faith. We'll see at the very end of the lesson, we're going to talk about that Rahab is listed in the hall of faith, chapter 11 of Hebrews, where all the people that were faithful, Abraham came to the Lord in faith. All the faith stories that are in that chapter, she is listed in there because of her faith in God, faith in a plan that really wasn't revealed at all. The plan was you drop the cord and we'll be back and you will be preserved and protected. But no date, no time, no how. I think she was a woman of trust. That was huge. That was huge. So the men go away and she waited. We don't know how long she waited. You can imagine the things she might have pondered. How long do I have to keep living with my parents, my siblings, and my relatives? How long am I going to be out of business? I'm not making any money. My family is eating me out of house and home. It's going to start looking suspicious at the grocery store when I have to go to Costco to get enough supplies for all of us. What if one of my relatives speaks up? Will they really be able to even see the red cord? When are they coming? Is today the day? What will happen to us? So many questions that would be perfectly normal for anyone to ask in that situation. Are there other questions that you might have had you been Rahab watching these men leave the wall? Is there anything else that you might be wondering? I would wonder, do they really mean it? Can I trust their word? These are total strangers to me. They stayed in my house for a night. I hid them for a day and then they were gone. She had no chance to get to know them, no chance to really see their heart, although they were kind to her. Any other questions that you could imagine she would have? Any other concerns, any other worries?
She's probably a good judge of character now because she dealt with so many characters.
So she was a good judge of character. She made a profession.
I would be really worried that someone in my family would take that rope down. People move things at my house, I'm just like.
And you can't tell them why it's there. You could say, I'm redecorating. They don't care. I'll move the rope. But somehow she prevailed. Yes.
Yes, this Karen. I was doing some research on that scarlet cord, and they used the scarlet yarn and cord when they did the purification rituals with the birds in the law that Moses had given them.
The imagery of the red is throughout Scripture. That's a great example, Karen. Thank you for researching that and sharing that with us. Hugely symbolic, hugely symbolic. I'd worry about my family. especially one sister. She doesn't like me. She wouldn't trust me. She would do anything she could to sabotage me. Do you think they like being cooped up without knowing why? I can't even imagine the tension in that.
We know that they actually were in there that whole time. She's right on the city wall. She will see them coming. She keeps an eye out. She's gonna see the armies coming to take over.
Well, they said to her, do not leave. Do not leave. These people need to move in with you.
Do we know they moved in right then and didn't wait till right before? I mean,
I don't
I
think
would
they
say
did.
that when I call you, you come to my house.
Right, right.
Don't ask me questions.
Well, they didn't know what they were gonna do. I mean, he just destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah
Right.
with, from the
Oh,
air.
that's true.
And it could have been anything. That's true. It could have been the army or it could be anything.
And it could be today.
Right.
Just like us, right? The second coming could be today. It could be before we're done tonight. So she had to have that caution of, because if you go out,
Right.
what if, right?
Well,
What if?
also her customers can't come there like
No.
usual, so they know something was up, and she would probably worry, what are they gonna think? Are they gonna talk to each other and to other people and blow the cover?
Blow the cover. She's a wise woman, though. She probably had a wonderful, I'm sick, I've got COVID.
The whole house has got COVID.
My whole house has got, my whole family's moved in, we're taking care of each other, we're all sharing our antibodies, who knows? But the Lord was working on her, and the Lord may have given her what she needed to pacify her family. We don't hear anything about her family and their reaction. We don't hear that at all.
So I did a word search.
Yeah.
We were talking, and somebody in one of the commentaries said that red was easy to see on the wall.
Easy to see, absolutely. Yeah.
One, and then the word, I don't know how to pronounce the tifa, which means robe, actually refers to hope. So the robe and the cord were hope for what was to come. And then this is an interesting thing that Rahab went on to marry one of the tribes, Salmon from the tribe of Judah. They had a son called Boaz.
You're stealing my conclusion.
Sorry.
That's why I said this is a good news story. It is the antithesis of last week. That is all absolutely true. Thank you for doing that research. All right, so we have just seen the men leave. She's dropped the scarlet cord, and they departed and came to the hill country and remained there for 3 days until the pursuers returned. In other words, they followed Rahab's instructions precisely. Now the pursuers had sought them all along the road, but they had not found them. Then the two men returned, the two spies, and came down from the hill country, crossed over, and came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and they related to him all that had happened. Remember, they were sent out on a mission. They were called spies because they were doing interrogation. Joshua, remember previously, I can't remember what book it's in, but where Joshua and Caleb went part of a group that were spying on the Canaanites. And so Joshua, sorry? Deuteronomy. So Joshua knew what it was to do reconnaissance, right? He knew. And so he probably gave very specific orders to the spies about what he wanted to learn from them. But here they are, they're coming back to Joshua in verse 24. And they said to him, surely the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and all the inhabitants of the earth, moreover, have melted before us. Notice two things. These words are almost verbatim what Rahab has said to them in verse 9. I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. They followed her instructions to the letter about where to go, and they're communicating back to Joshua exactly what she has noticed about her people in Jericho. So this trust is pretty evident in what they report to Joshua. The other thing that's interesting, what is the verb tense here? Surely the Lord has given. It's already done. And Rahab in verse 9 used the same language. The Lord has given you the land. When we're worried about whether God's going to show up for us, believe it's already done. It just hasn't been revealed to us. It's not time yet. But he has already given over Jericho to Joshua's army. There hasn't been battle number 1 fought. Verse, let me see where I want to go next. Yeah, I'm going to have you, I'm going to skim. So now from verses 3 through 5, the early part of 6, this is Joshua preparing the army, getting the rest of his commanders in line. There's no battle plan yet to talk about because God has not revealed the battle plan to Joshua, but preparing them to work together as a unit to take Canaan back. They crossed the Jordan River, which is significant, and they laid 12 stones in the base of the river as symbolic memorial. They circumcised all the people because remember, they're Jews. They had to make sure all the males were circumcised, and perhaps some of them weren't. Some of them that maybe weren't Jewish but became Jewish by the clan, but now they needed to be fully circumcised because that was part of the covenant. But chapter 5, verse 13. Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho. So he's moved his camp a little closer. He's left Shittah, and now he's near Gilgal. So he's moved a little closer to the Jordan River. Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with a sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said, "Are you for us or for our adversaries? I don't recognize you." And the person said, "No, rather I indeed come now as captain of the host of the Lord." And Joshua fell on his face and bowed down and said to him, "What has my Lord to say to his servant?" So the commentaries say it was Michael the archangel. There's other angels that have been presumed, could have been the Lord himself. But here's the Lord saying, "I have come as the captain of the host of the Lord." This was God's war. Joshua was just a vessel. It was God's war. It was God's plan. God chose Rahab. God chose all of it. And yet Joshua still doesn't know, but he knows all those things that the Lord had told him in chapter 1, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Here he's making that statement again. I'm coming to you as the captain of the host of the Lord. The host of the Lord, all the angel armies. What better battalion would you want than all the angel armies? And the captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for this place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. Holy because maybe God was there. Maybe those are God's feet on that same land. Verse 6, here we go. Now, Jericho, verse 1, was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. That, every wall would have had a gate or multiple gates that would have been put down or brought up, depending on whether they wanted the city open to others or not. We can see here it was tightly shut. They didn't want anybody coming in. They didn't want anybody going out. They were in fear of Joshua's men, his warriors that were quite nearby. Now the battle plan starts to be revealed in verse 2. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and the valiant warriors. They are already shaking in their boots. And you shall march around the city, all the men of war, circling the city once. You shall do so for 6 days. Also, 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And it shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout." What's the song? And came tumbling down. I was going to sing it for you, but You're a better chorus. And the people will shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up every man straight ahead. In other words, the city wall that you think is protecting you will crush you. It will destroy you. It will come tumbling down. Not just one area that the army can penetrate and come in. The whole wall will collapse upon itself. Envision what happened at 9/11 when the Twin Towers came crashing down. So Joshua, verse 6, the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the Ark of the Covenant and let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Ark of the Lord. So now he's let the priests in on the secret. Then he said to the people, it's day 1. Go forward and march around the city and let the armed men go on before the Ark of the Lord. Don't you know these guys were anxious to know the battle plan? They'd been assembled, they'd been trained, they had moved closer to their destination of Jericho. And then they hear this plan. Go forward and march around the city and let the armed men go on before the Ark of the Lord. And it was so that when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns are a symbol of jubilee. They're a celebratory instrument. Again, the Lord has given them over to you. Carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord went forward and blew the trumpets, and the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men before the priests who blew the trumpets and the rear guard came after the ark while they continued to blow the trumpet. Lots and lots of detail. Does any of it sound military? You're a warrior. You're in the army. You've got your fatigues on. You've got your bayonet, and you're going to march around the city. But Joshua commanded the people, saying, you shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor let a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I tell you. Shout, then you shall shout. Joshua gave them an instruction every day. They were given no more information than they needed for that day. What story in the Bible does that remind you of? They were only given what they needed for one day. Manna in the wilderness. So he had the Ark of the Lord taken around the city, certainly at once, and they came into the camp and spent the night in the camp. Now Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the Ark of the Covenant. And I'm not going to read it all again because it's exactly what I've just read to you. That was the end of the first day. Instruction started between God and Joshua, then to his commanders, now to the army. Thus, the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. And they did so for 6 days, playing the horns, playing their instruments, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, perfectly silent. Not a word was uttered. Then it came about on the 7th day, the number of perfection, that they rose early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. The same drill, the same formation, 7 times. Only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. Repetition. And it came about at the 7th time when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And only then did they speak up. At this point in time, the city was utterly destroyed. The walls came tumbling down. Then there's a further instruction from Joshua. And the city shall be under the ban, and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. So now all the men in the army know to protect Rahab and her family. But as for you, there will be no plunder here. God doesn't want things that are sinful. He doesn't want idols. He doesn't want things that were used in deprived lifestyles. Only keep yourself from the things under the ban, lest you covet them, and take some of those things under the ban so you would make the camp of Israel accursed and bring trouble on it. We don't want any of that stuff brought into our camp. We don't want to defile it with the evil that is here. But all the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted, the priests blew the trumpets, and it came about when they heard the sound of the trumpet that the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat. So that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. It had been conquered on the seventh day, after the seventh round of going around the wall and shouting. And they utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep, donkey, with the edge of the sword. And Joshua said to the two men who had spied on the land, okay, you know Rahab, you know the harlot, you know the woman that helped make all this happen. Go back to her house and bring the woman and all she has out of there as you have sworn to her. So the young men who were spies went in. Notice they don't have any names. They're just known as the spies. The spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brothers and sisters and all that they had, and they brought them all out to place them outside of the camp of Israel. Why would, here's the camp, all of the soldiers, all of these Jewish warriors and Joshua and his leaders, they're all together, but they have Rahab and her family outside. Why would that be? She's not an Israelite. She's not Jewish. They may not have had certainty that she really loved the Lord, that she was a God follower, or maybe she would revert to her ways. Didn't have a lot of information. So for now, she's out. She's with them. She's not really with them. She's outside of them. And they proceeded to burn the city with fire and all that was in it. Only the silver and the gold and the articles of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. They were obedient. There was no plundering. They didn't take any of the things that the Lord told them not to. However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared. And she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day. She went from being outside the circle to inside the circle, for she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Now, you may think that's the end of the story, but it's not. God's grace was evident through this whole thing. This was his battle to win. He made the choice of Rahab. He knew the kind of woman she was, not that she was a prostitute, but she was a wise woman and she was knowledgeable about people. She was discerning. She was a good choice to be the place that the spies would go. God led the people to her, the people that were traveling to and from Jericho, and they were the ones that informed Rahab not only about God, but all the things happening around Jericho that might be a threat to them. God revealed to her that she was living in an accursed situation of sin, death, and destruction. It was time to get out. It was time to have a new life. The Lord led the spies to her home. The Lord gave her faith to believe and courage to follow him and depart from everything she knew. She left it all behind. Unlike Lot's wife, who longingly looked back, not wanting to leave anything behind. He gave Rahab courage to hide the spies and then to lie about where they were. So little lies, promoting God's will and not evil. She was clever in the plan that she devised to hide the men, to distract the king's men, and protect the spies. And the Lord has given her a new future. This is what you were saying. This one-time heathen prostitute would eventually marry Samal. One is spelled salmon, but it's pronounced Samal. One of the two spies she sheltered. They didn't have a name, but now they do. Samal. Here's a quote from Herbert Lockyer, who's written a wonderful book on women of the Bible. The gratitude Samal felt for Rahab ripened into love. And when grace erased her former life of shame, he made her his wife. Samal was from a leading family of Israel and eventually the prince of the house of Judah. Not just any old guy. He was a guy that mattered in the kingdom of God. In gratitude, he paid back the life he owed her by a love that was honorable and true. She became the mother of Boaz, known as the kinsman redeemer, who married Ruth, who we'll be studying next week, and whose son Obed begot Jesse, the father of David, and who is in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Do you see how this was God's war that he won, and the blessing? This is a woman who we would shun, and how mightily he used her. Do you think God can't use you? Think again. I'm here to tell you that he can and he will if you are obedient. His grace knows no boundaries. Despite the fact she was a prostitute, she had many good characteristics, some that came from being a prostitute. She was shrewd. She'd been a good listener. She knew how to keep secrets. She was open to believing new information that she learned. She was compassionate, not only for her family, but for the spies who she hid. Despite her sinful past, she had a deep concern for others. She called for her entire family to be saved from destruction, and my guess, they were eventually believers in the Lord God. Even the worst or most flawed among us has a place in God's kingdom. God used an elderly couple, Abraham and Sarah, in their 90s and 100, as many to have a son, as many, and create a whole generation of people of God. A stutterer, Moses, to speak for him in the book of Exodus. A weakling to defend him, Gideon. A young man to be the most unforgettable king of the Jewish people and a man after God's own heart, David. An unknown virgin to be the mother of Mary. Persecutor to take the gospel to the Gentiles, Paul. A loudmouthed, impulsive man to become the rock upon which the church was formed. It wasn't so unusual for him to use a prostitute to make a way for Joshua. He can use any of us. He's not waiting for us to be spotless. He's just waiting for us to have a willing heart. Rahab is a wonderful example of what can happen in a changed life, in a transformed life. She had faith and she had trust. She risked her life and she turned her back on everything familiar to follow the Lord. And she was redeemed for it. So I have something for you. I don't have a Christian answer. I love the imagery of the red cord. And so for each one of you, I've created a red cord. I'd like to think you would put it in your Bible. I keep it in whatever I'm teaching at the present time. But every time you feel it, you see it, the red can remind you that you have been saved by grace, that the Lord Jesus shed his blood upon the cross for you, that you are his. You can also think of Rahab, her courage, her braveness, how God used her, all of her. Think about that. He used all of her. The sexual part went away, but all of the rest of what she was, he used. You know, a lot of us move through life and we change careers and we change jobs and life is changed. And I always marvel when I look back and see how everything works for good. Everything is part of my now. Everything is part of my future. Don't waste your past. Whatever you have done in the past, he has forgiven. He wants to use you where you are right now. Whatever gifts and talents you have as a mom, as a teacher, as an employee, as a worker, as a physician, as a nurse, whatever characteristics and attributes you have, he can use those. You don't have to do something different. You can do what you do for the Lord. Ask God for faith and courage when the times get tough. Remember, I will always be with you. I will never forsake you. Be strong and courageous, mighty warriors. So there you have it, the story of Rahab. She's an amazing woman. It's so easy for us to look down upon people that maybe don't have what we have in terms of profession or wealth or anything else, but God can use all of us. Any questions, any comments before I close this in prayer? Some of the cords are longer, some of them are shorter. If you have a long cord and you need a shorter one, some people have shorter cords and may want a longer one. I'll let you wrestle with that. I'll let you. Any questions, any comments? She's mentioned in the Hall of Faith, Hebrews 11, verse 31. She's mentioned in the lineage of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 1. She's mentioned 3 times in the Bible. She's only one of 2 women that are named in the Hall of Faith. She is a big deal in the Bible.
Where is it where it says she married Salmon?
It is in Matthew 1.
Oh, that's the Matthew.
It's in the lineage of Jesus. But when we study Ruth and Naomi, it's in there as well. Boaz is the son of Salmon and Rahab. Yeah, it's in Matthew 1. I don't know what verse. Not too far in because it's pretty close to the creation.
Is that what you have? Matthew 1:5.
Matthew 1:5. Thank you. Hebrews 11:31. Hall of Faith. James 22:25. Look that one up real quick. James 2:25. And in the same way, this is talking about works and faith. That, it's not, works is not how you get into heaven, how you accept Christ. It's by faith. But once we accept Christ as Lord and Savior, there's an expectation that we will act, we will do something. And the reference here is in the same way, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? So what she did was an act for God. Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I found interesting, I don't know, you can't really mention it, but it says that the wall fell flat, but Rahab lived on the wall and she told her family the wall. And I always wonder, like, God, how do you, I just feel like that's such a true miracle because they would all be dead.
That section did not
Yeah,
fall.
it didn't fall.
That section did not fall.
All the others fell.
Whole rest of it did.
Because there's a song in the wall,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so you.
So you're gonna be singing that on the way home tonight. Questions, comments? Next week, we're doing Ruth and Naomi. I'm pretty sure. Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to do the whole book of Ruth, but it's only 4 chapters. It's not that many verses. Some of you know the story, but we're going to look at some things slightly differently. So with that, let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for the words in your book penned by Joshua that tell us so much about your faithfulness to us, that we are not in any battle alone, that you are with us, that you are for us, and you'll give us what we need. We aim to be brave and courageous women who will go out and serve you and love you and make a difference in the world because we trust in you and have faith in you. Be with these women as they head home tonight. Give them safety. Pray that we'll have a good rest of the week and a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday. Thank you for the women on the Zoom call. It's hard sometimes to just hang in there on Zoom, but I'm so grateful for that. And don't worry, Zoom ladies, you're going to get your red cords as well. Thank you for Kristen, who makes my job so easy, and for Robbie as well. They've just been a blessing to me. So I ask all of this in your precious son's name and just pray that everything we do and say, Lord, will be pleasing to you. Amen.